Wow, what great images you guys came up with for our discussion last week. It was a great way to really kick off the class, and I even appreciated how we started off the conversation kind of analyzing and picking apart our textbook for the class. So that was a very fantastic approach to this first week. Some of the main themes that occurred as I was reading last week's discussion are there on the screen. So the first comment that really jumped out at me was that of perspective and context. So on screen, you should see some of the different images that we had that were discussed last week. But I want to highlight a few of these. Namely, take a look at the World War II poster. And there was an interesting conversation that started to arise. It didn't really fully develop, but talking about perspective and what do you see initially when you look at this poster? Or in the case of that discussion, what don't you see? In this case, the conversation revolved around moving the image of females forward during World War II, but the lack of diversity or color in the women who are portrayed in the poster. Sometimes when we talk about perspective, we don't always address the role of perspective in interpreting messages, or the role of context and what happens when you look at a message in context versus out of context, and how does that change your perspective and how you're viewing that message. So some things to think about as we look at different messages and as we design different messages kind of rest in that perspective and context issue. The second conversation that was emerging was that of purpose and what is this being used for? Is your message designed specifically for a branding purpose? Or are we talking about something a little bit more along the lines of disseminating knowledge and instruction? So you can think about the band album and think about albums in general and what kind of brand message is trying to be portrayed. Or if you looked at some of the football posters and what brand is being portrayed by those organizations, those institutions. Branding is a large part of the conversation with message design and having a consistent message carry over. But I know that with the USC poster, I believe it was, there was a question about using other school logos and whether or not USC had permission. I definitely want you to go back and take a look at a reply that I shared there, because every university does have a brand guide or brand and standards manual that must be followed. These guides dictate what size logos can be, the different kinds of approved logos, where they can be used, and even give you the color codes that make up the university's colors. So for example, UW brown and gold. If you're looking at RGB colors, then UW brown is 73 red, 47 green, 36 blue. That's the color combination to get our perfect shade of brown. UW gold is 255 red, 196 green, and 37 blue. And there's even a corresponding hexadecimal code that goes with that shading so that if you're working in web design environments, you can use those color codes. Pantone is one of the major organizations for colors and design, and they maintain a list of institution-approved shades. So it's interesting when you think about the branding aspect with messaging and whether you're just trying to stay high level or if you're down in the weeds. Something else to think about there. Number 3, the whole marketing versus instructional comes back to purpose as well, and I mentioned that just a little bit ago. But are you trying to market something, or are you trying to instruct? And this is where we can think about the different images that you've shared. So everything from the mango butter to if you are trying to brand the Air Force. What is that image conveying? How is it being used? Or is there a component of an image that has a specific purpose? Because you could even break down labels on products and say that the nutritional information is disseminating knowledge, but the logo of the company is a brand. Very complex intertwining elements here. And then last but not least, language. And I wanted to point out the one image we had that was not in English and how design can transcend language. And even if you look at the French Remembrance poster that was shared, we don't always need words or a language to tell the story of a picture. And sometimes we don't even look at the words that are on the picture. We interpret meaning from the elements of the image. So that's what the point of last week was, to set the stage and how we look at message design. So with that, let's move right along and take a look at the Twitter expectations of class participation. Use the on-screen navigation to access another section of this week's overview.